Thanks everybody for coming. I invite Letizia Mencarini as the chair of the first session and the three, I think Gabriella, sorry, should sit, yes, yes, please, and Maria Gabriella, and Ivett, and Maria.
So, but if I stay here, don't see anything. No, I can see something. Straight.
You can say I can see it. Probably Ivett, you can start from here.
So we have around 45 minutes with three presentations. So how long have you been told to talk? 15 minutes?
15, yeah.
Okay, 15. But Maria Letizia, sorry, do you want to discuss each paper or we just...
No, we can just make a discussion at the end.
Okay. So max 15, I mean, better a couple of minutes less.
Okay. Should I upload? Oh, it's here. Thank you. Thank you so much. So this presentation about measuring voluntary childlessness. We have started to work on this project with Maria Letizia since 4 years or 3 years, so quite along. And yesterday we just received the accepted letter of this paper, so the timing was perfect. Yeah, at the end. And how can I? Yeah, oh, okay. No, that one. Okay. So attitudes towards voluntary childlessness. Actually, the traditional norms, having children was essential part of the life course. So voluntary childlessness was not prevalence phenomenon. And the cultural shifts, which started in the 1960s in Western European countries, bring that having children became a choice rather than an obligation. Of course, it's happened a little bit later in the post-socialist countries, just after the 1990s. But the technological impact was also a very important part of this story, because the widely available contraceptive was essential to the phenomenon of voluntary childlessness, which make possible to separate the sexuality from motherhood. The previous research about attitudes towards voluntary childlessness are very mixed, because based on the qualitative research, usually they find that people have more favorable attitudes towards voluntary men than voluntary women. However, in the surveys, the findings are just the opposite. So there are double standards favoring women. So this is a contradicting results, and we try to find out what are behind it. Actually, the surveys which are available are not proper to find it out. So our aim is to identify the factors shaping the attitudes towards voluntary childlessness, and we compare two international surveys which use different items, whether they measure the same dimension of voluntary childlessness. The childlessness rate, actually there is lack of recent data for international comparison, so I still used our own data, what we collected in the Families and Societies project. And what we can see, the rate of childlessness is increasing. This data shows between 2000 and 2010, but if we check the individual countries, we can see even between 2010 and nowadays it's still increasing. In 2010, the childlessness rate was the highest in Switzerland, Canada, United States, and Italy, the female childlessness. And the male childlessness was the highest in Italy, but almost in all countries, the female childlessness is lower than the male childlessness. However, these two figures, it's not identical, but the male childlessness is higher. So in Italy, the prevalence of childlessness is quite high. However, the attitudes towards voluntary childlessness is not very favorable. So Italy doesn't belong to the country groups where people accept voluntary childlessness. So you can find Italy more closer to the post-socialist countries in this dimension. So theoretical framework, we can use the same theoretical frameworks about attitudes towards voluntary childlessness as the researchers use in explaining fertility. So the new home economics theory, which says because of the rising opportunity cost of childbearing as women enter the labor market, can cause some changes. So in our case, women are more accepting towards voluntary childlessness, and those who are higher educated because they are more attached to the labor market, and the employment status can be very important factor because those who are employed, maybe they have more favorable attitudes towards voluntary childlessness. We also use the gender revolution theory, as previous research find, in those societies where there is gender equality, the acceptance of voluntary childlessness is higher, so that's what we expected. As for the second demographic transition, because of the prevalence of post-materialistic values, so we expect in those countries where the second demographic transition is more advanced, people are more favorable towards the voluntary childlessness, and the young people and high educated people also have more favorable attitudes. What we find in the literature, especially in the American and English literature, is that they make distinction between prescriptive and proscriptive attitudes. Actually, prescriptive when the social rules prescribe us to have children, so it reflects to the social expectation of parenthood. This is exactly what was measured in the European Social Survey when they asked, how much do you approve or disapprove if a man chooses never to have children? And it can have some stigma, social punishment if they do not follow this rule. As for the prospective attitudes, it's more focus on the negative consequences of not having children. So in the European value study item, which measure with the following items, a man has to have children to be fulfilled, it's exactly measured that it has a negative consequence if you do not have children. So the data and methods, as I mentioned, we used these two international surveys. The European Value Study asked this item in 2008. However, it has a more recent round, but they did not ask this item, unfortunately. And the European Social Survey asked this item in 2018 and also in 2006, but we prefer to choose the more recent data. However, we did some robustness check. We involved 27 countries, European countries. Italy is among the countries, and we limited the data sets for those who are over 18. Still, there are some limitations. For example, the time gap, there are 10 years between the two data sets. And the double standards are unmeasurable because of some data limitation in the ESS. They divide the sample, and half of the sample was asked only about female voluntary childlessness, and the other half of the sample only the male voluntary childlessness. So they were our dependent variables, and because in the EVS the question regarding female childlessness was a binary and not measured on a Likert scale, we decided to use a multi-level logistic regression model, and we coded all the items according to that. If voluntary childlessness acceptable, it's 1. If it's negative or neutral, we coded it 0. Okay. And independent, we involved individual level independent variables, the classical gender, age group, education, labor force activity, partnership status, parental status, so somebody has children or no, and religious attendance. As for the country level variables, we involved the childlessness rate, we aggregated the country mean of attendance religious services. We used the gender inequality index from the Human Development Report, and these were our country level variables. So the descriptive results, we can see that the countries vary a lot. So the northern countries, about acceptance of female voluntary childlessness, they belong to those countries where this is accepted, and the post-socialist countries can be found on the other edge of the figure. And Italy is more related to these post-socialist countries. And actually, Denmark is a little bit outsider, but we cannot explain why. On the prescriptive measurement, they are very tolerant. However, at the proscriptive measurement, it seems they think it has some negative consequences if somebody doesn't want to have children. As for the male childlessness, we found very similar patterns, and again, Italy is more similar to the post-socialist countries. Results for the individual level variables, actually we received what we expected. So women have more favorable attitudes towards male and female voluntary childlessness. This is the same for the younger people and higher educated people, as we expected from the theories. Religiosity matters a lot, so those who regularly attend religious service, they have less favorable attitudes. Employment status matters, so compare those who are active on the labor market. Pensioners and unemployed less accepting. However, unemployed people less accepting only on the prescriptive dimension. Family status matters a lot, so compared to married people, those who live in cohabitation or who are single, they have less tolerant attitudes. parental status matters, so those who have children, they have less tolerant attitudes towards voluntary childlessness. As for country-level variables, our findings were not so clear. Actually, the childlessness rate matters only in the prospective dimension. So in those countries where people think it has negative consequences if you do not have children, it matters. But as in the prescriptive dimension, the childlessness rate doesn't matter. For the gender inequality index, it was very clear. It matters in all dimensions. So in societies where the gender equality is higher, people are more tolerant towards voluntary childlessness. But the most striking results for us was the lack of the effect of country-level religiousness. We really tried other kind of measurement of religiousness at country level, but it never had significant effect, which is striking because at the individual level it really matters a lot, but not at country level. So the main conclusion, actually, we find exactly the same findings if we measure the attitudes towards male or attitudes towards female voluntary childlessness. So it seems that it's not worth dividing these items according to gender. However, it matters the way how we measure the attitudes towards voluntary childlessness. So it's important to make distinction between the dimensions of voluntary childlessness. What we find when we systematically review the international survey is that there is lack of question about social parenting. So it's an important issue to measure because of the blended families. It's come more and more in nowadays. And it's also important to understand what people, the respondents, think when we ask this kind of items from them, and that's why we need a qualitative study to understand more about the attitudes towards voluntary childlessness, and it's important because the number of childless people is increasing. Thank you very much.